Okay, let me go back one page.
I
Okay,
just got
so
a notification saying it is being recorded.
Yeah, this is the 6th time that I've taught this class. This one is a little bit different because I am gearing it towards the military members. Now, when I started teaching this class, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted it to be a writing class. And I had written a lot of obituaries. I wrote them as a public affairs officer when I was in the Army. And I wanted to be able to teach this as a writing class. And surprisingly, there is very little information about how to write an obituary. But as you start reading all the various things, they kind of give you a pattern of what you should do. But there are no hard and fast rules about how to write your obituary. So the process that I use is we start with that obituary template, and you put that into your word processing document so that you can add to it. You can take things out of it that don't work for you, and we begin to add a little bit of color into it. And then we add some anecdotal information and some stories, hopefully some that come from the people that you sent out the friends and family interviews to. Our goal is that by next week we will have a short newspaper obituary, and then we will move on to the longer online obituary where you will be able to include a lot more of the stories. So we're going to start with an exercise. This is called a tombstone exercise, and so it's kind of we're just going to take a minute. You can jot down some notes. We'll use part of this as we go through our introductions. But the tombstone exercise is, what do you want written on your tombstone? What is it? Who are you? Who am I? What is my purpose and what am I most proud of? So think about that for just a minute. Maybe jot down a few ideas. So when I think about this, who I am and what my purpose is, I think about when I started trying to teach the Native American style flute, what was my vision when I tried to do that? And I saw in my mind, I saw an older person who lived by themselves, and it was an Iowa winter with lots of snow, and they were sitting by a window and they were playing their Native American flute. And so that was my vision, and I geared my whole class towards that vision. And what am I most proud of? It's my dissertation, probably. I think it is pretty historically important. When I started working on my dissertation, I had to find the ladies. As Cynthia knows, she's the one that got me started looking for the other women in our class. Cynthia Hicks and I were in the same commissioning class. We were the last direct commission class into the Women's Army Corps. Well, it culminated with 13 of us getting together a couple of years ago, and we're going to get together again. And so just listen to this.
One's in Long Island, one's they are serious, but I'm hoping they want to get it. That would be fun. In August, late August, we met
These women had not seen each other in 40 years. They went in 1977, the same as the class of 77, and they had not seen each other in over 40 years. And as you could see, the talking never stopped the entire time we were together. I'm trying to move on. Okay, so as I'm thinking about this class and what I want my final wishes to be, I decided, instead of playing taps at my funeral, I want some of I've taught over 50 people how to play the Native American style flute, so I would like it if some of my students got together and played a song for me, maybe one that I taught them how to play. So I don't know if any of you have watched the Netflix series, The Bridgertons. It tends to appeal mainly to women, but there is a wonderful, wonderful person who is the narrator of that story, and she has a unique accent and a unique outlook on things. And so she would read she would read my obituary, and it would sound like this: Gentle readers, Mary Lou has helped many people write their own obituaries over the years. However, hers was sorely lacking. So we're going to start out with introductions. We're going to go into the history of obituaries. We're going to talk about the different types of obituaries, and then how to go about writing your obituaries, gathering the facts. We will do a mind mapping exercise, and then we will work on our newspaper obituary. Okay, so what this class is, it's a class to help you write your own obituary. I have to remind people of that in a lot of the classes that I take, because they come to the class so that they can write somebody else's obituary. But it's a class to write your own. And the reason why it is a class to write your own is because it's really an exercise in self-reflection, looking back over your life and seeing what you've done, what you've accomplished. And then that gives you a clearer focus on maybe where you want to go in the future. So this is basically a creative writing class. You want to be honest and factual, but we also want to kind of be creative in how we go about putting our obituary together. No two obituaries are exactly alike. So at the end of this class, you'll have a newspaper obituary, you'll have an online obituary, and I hope you'll have some insight in how to continue to live the best life that you possibly can. So writing your obituary is not saying it's over. It's like saying, this is what it's like writing a micro memoir, and then you go on from there. So let's look at the history of obituaries. So before we had written obituaries, we had obituaries that were on walls, story walls, cave drawings. And then they actually started writing obituary in 59 BC. They had a newspaper called the Acta Diurna, and they had obituaries that were written in that newspaper, and it was published daily and distributed in Rome. So those were our first obituaries. So obituaries have changed over the years. This was one that was written in 1887. St. Donatus, Jackson County, Iowa, March 16, 1887. On Saturday evening, the 12th of March, died here in St. Donatus after a long, painful illness, properly blessed with the Holy Sacraments, surrendered to God's will, Magdalena Holman, born Streff. The deceased, as born in 1821 in New Hausen, and reached the age of 66 years. With her family, she came to America in 1848. They settled in St. Donatus. From her marriage with Peter Holman, who died 8 months ago, spouted 13 children. I love that. I don't know how you spout children, but spouted 13 children, 5 of which are dead, the others alive and in good condition. The couple was very respected. May she rest in peace. So that's how obituaries were written back in the 1800s. So this is one that a funeral director that I know loves to share. And this was noted Midwestern raconteur Omer Baumgartner passed away at his home in Ames, Iowa on Tuesday, February 8, 2011. He was 90 years old. Mr. Baumgartner had lived a long and passionate life dedicated to rambunctious performances and dairy products. Born on a dairy farm in Walnut, Illinois, Baumgartner was prodigious with the movement of manure from an early age, and exercising these and other talents, earned recognition for his national 4-H grand champion dairy heifer Clementine's Ramona in 1930 at the age of 10. After this debut, and as the Depression raged, Baumgartner cut his teeth in the livestock industry while attending hundreds of county and state fairs, showing and selling cattle, frying oysters, skinning rabbits, and drinking whiskey. While still a freshman at the University of Illinois, he successfully quelled the Great Dairy Uprising of 1938. And there was a lot of dairy problems and a lot of dairy riots that went on during that time and went on in Illinois, averting a desperate ice cream shortage in Chicago, and was immediately recruited and without finishing college by the state's Guernsey Breeders Association as field agent. Despite never learning to cook anything other than fried oysters, Baumgartner attained the rank of captain during World War II for running mess halls, feeding over 5,000 in Tennessee and Alabama for the Army Air Corps. He was wildly popular with the troops for his mess hour bongo drum performances, accompanied by dancing girls. Baumgartner notably worked for L.S. Heath and Company, running the dairy division and inventing the Heath Bar ice cream in 1951. He also co-ran Wilkinson's office supplies with his wife, J.D. Wilkinson Baumgartner, serving 1/3 of the state of Illinois and parts of Iowa. Baumgartner disliked vegetables his whole life. Despite consuming more than 2,000 pounds of butter, he never suffered from any kind of disease. His last meal was ice cream. So that was an obituary that was written by a nephew, and so I was really curious about some of these things, and I went back and I found out, when the Heath Bar ice cream was invented, and it was invented in 1951, and he was working for the L.S. Heath Company, and so that would make sense that he might have been involved in that. So you can see that obituaries have changed. And some obituaries are more fun to read than others. And I would like you to write an interesting obituary, one that would keep me reading to the very end. So you want to make your obituary personal. And these are some comments that have come from obituarists, people who write obituaries professionally. They share something personal in the obituary, bring in a little humor. If you don't want that in the newspaper, don't put it in the newspaper, just put it in a memorial record. And all of our lives have peaks and valleys, so don't be afraid to share the journey. And have friends and family see that they were an important part of your journey. And I think that that is something that, as we went through that tombstone exercise, almost everybody talked about relationships and how they wanted to be remembered for their relationships. So there are several types of obituaries. The one is just the informative, and it basically gives you just the facts. It tells you everything that you need to know. If you worked on your obituary template, that is just the facts. It doesn't really tell us who you were. It just gives the facts about your life. And so that's what an informative obituary does. And we find that because obituaries can be very, very expensive, that sometimes people are just actually not doing an obituary. They're printing almost like a want ad type of announcement that is more of an announcement. It gives their name, the date of death, where they lived, if they were a resident of Chicago or wherever. And then it tells when the service is going to be and has a link in it or directs you to an online obituary. So you'll see that frequently also. There really are just no rules. Now, an informative obituary actually contains urgent information. It's not just the factual. It tells you when the service is going to be held. And so that has to be put into the newspaper right away, so that your family is going to be under some stress to get an obituary and get it published so that it can contain this information about where the service is going to be held. And so that will be a driving factor. So these are some historical informative obituaries. We'll start with Alma's. Now, what is really interesting about Alma is Alma was 91 years old, and as you read through her obituary, she was an employee of the Bankers Trust Company for 65 years. She retired in 2014 and she died in 2015. She retired at the age of 90. I just find that so fascinating. But you have to kind of put that together as you read through this. So her husband Thurl passed away earlier, and this is Thurl's obituary. And it says that he lived in Des Moines since 1945 and was a retired accounting controller at Gordon's Wholesale Incorporated. He was a World War II veteran and a member of the Disabled American Veterans. He also was a songwriter. So I like that. He was a songwriter. But what this doesn't tell you about Thurl was that Thurl was, he was captured. He was a POW during World War II. He was captured in North Africa in 1943. In 1945, he had been in a POW camp in northern Poland, right along the Baltic Sea. And in February and March of 1945, he was force marched along with everybody else from his camp, and they stopped and picked up other people along the way. He was force marched 500 miles over 41 days. They rested in one camp for a while, and then in April they were force marched again. They did 90 miles in 5 days, and at the end of that 5 days, Thurl and 3 of his friends crawled into a barn to die, and they were rescued by the American forces that day. None of that is there in Thurl's obituary. So it would be nice to know a little bit more about Thurl than what is actually in his obituary. It just does not tell us enough and do justice to Thurl. Of course, that may be a part of his life he didn't really want to share. So these are some other obituaries. So this one, and my markings didn't show up where I want to read. Okay, so I can't see what it was I wanted to read. Oh, Ed grew up, graduated from Adele DeSoto, and he was united in marriage to Betty Otto. To this union brought 3 children, and Ed proudly served his country with the United States Army and the Army National Guard. And so that doesn't really tell us a lot about Edward Linneman. Now, Ruth was a telephone operator, and she spent a couple of years working for the ASC office. And then it says here that Ruth was an active member of the Loring United Methodist Church. And she loved crafts and had been a cake decorator since 1960. And so that tells us a little bit more about Ruth, but it would be nice to know something maybe more than that about them. So what I like is the opinative dictionary, the obituary, which begins to add some color. So it tells us more about the person. The Omer Baumgartner was an opinative obituary. It was very highly subjective and certainly a tribute to Omer. So an opinative begins to tell us a little bit more about the person. So here is Cameron, and the only thing in here that I like, he spent many years working as a mechanic and working in construction. Cameron loved hard and played hard, and if you knew him, he was a Harley man. So that tells us a lot about Cameron, and it does it in a very short period of time. It doesn't use a lot of words to explain what Cameron was like. This one, Tom grew up hunting, fishing, and riding anything with 2 wheels all around the foothills and south hills of southern Idaho. He attended school in both Hollister and Filer. As always, Tom was ready for another adventure, so he enlisted in the Navy in 1971 and served as a jet mechanic until 1979. While serving, he married Elaine Van Horn in Filer, Idaho. Later, the 2 divorced, but together they had 2 sons. When he wasn't able to make the most of being outdoors, Tom went to work for the fish hatchery and driving truck. Tom met the love of his life and soulmate Nancy Erdman in 1993. They went on 1 date and they were never apart after that. Tom's children became Nancy's and Nancy's children became Tom's. And then at the bottom it says, "Keep the rubber down, Tom. You will be forever missed and always in our hearts." So what we've got here is we've also got the how we met story. That's always a great thing to include in an obituary, how we met. People love to know that, how we met. So another one, this one talks about how what Bill was interested in kind of changed over time. So let's see. Bill and Barb first met in the nursery of St. John's Lutheran Church while they were still infants. After years of singing in the church choir together, the 2 were married in 1957 and welcomed 5 children into their South Des Moines home. And so there you've got the how we met story. That's always a good one. Bill is survived by his 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 31 great-grandchildren. Their same South Des Moines home was filled with furniture and projects from Bill's woodworking shop, as his creations were built from scratch and were proclaimed to be Truett-built. These pieces of furniture served as a gathering place for years to come for holidays and celebrations, as Bill and Barbara saw the welcomed additions to their family. So throughout the 6 decades in their home, Bill could be found in his backyard at Fort Des Moines Little League, where he was coach and a member of the Hall of Fame, or taking his 5 little wanderers on trips across the Midwest. And no matter the generation of family, Bill always found time to sit in the bleachers at hundreds of baseball, softball, basketball, and football games. often with words of encouragement and on rare occasions, a sharp kick in the pants. And so later, he was fascinated with reading about World War II. And so it kind of tells us how Bill changed over time. But still, you had that idea, that Bill was grounded in family and that furniture, that he built and then the number of football games and baseball games that he attended in order to be with his grandchildren. And so we begin to see something about Bill Truitt, and that's what I would like you to have in your newspaper obituary, is to begin to see who you were, who you are right now. Okay, so we've got Diane Shoup. She was a gracious, loving lady and the ultimate caregiver who will be missed dearly by the many people whose lives she touched. She was a quiet force of her rambunctious family. She lived a life filled with grace and loved spending time with her children and grandchildren. Despite her gentle, quiet demeanor, she had a competitive spirit and enjoyed tennis, golf, table tennis, bridge, cribbage, and learned how to ski at the age of 50. She was a well-adorned champion of Fair Hills resort tournaments, a place she loved to vacation with her family in the summer. As the daughter of a former editor of the Cedar Rapids Gazette, proper command of the English language was of paramount importance, and Reader's Digest word power quizzes were commonplace at the Shoup family dinner table. She had a delightful sense of humor and was a wonderful friend to so many, helping to create a magical childhood neighborhood filled with adventure, joy, and enjoyed the ladies of the lake. In retirement, she and Joe loved to spend time at their summer home in Minnesota. So here you have a really complete picture of who Diane was and what was important in her life. And you get that feeling, yes, of graciousness. You get that feeling of kind of quiet strength, through by reading her obituary. So her obituary begins to tell us something about her, and that is what we want to do with our own. So the first thing that you want to do, there are certain steps that you do when you write an obituary, and you can go through any of the things that have been written, and they basically take you through these steps, although they call them different things. But first of all, they want you to gather the facts. They want you to get the biographical information. And this is what can be very difficult for outsiders to have to do for you. And so this is why we have that obituary template, which has got that biographical, you put that biographical information in, and then you're supplying that to whoever is going to be responsible for your obituary. The second thing that you want to do, that obituarists do, is that they conduct interviews with family and friends. And so that's why we've got that family and friend interview. It might be really hard to call someone on the phone and ask them to tell you a story about you, but it's not so difficult to send them an email and ask them to do that, or to fill out this form, because then they have time to think about it and to really put some thought into it, and they're not so on the spot. So that's a very, very important thing to do. And we asked too that the members of the class of 77, that 3 of their friends and family interviews should be sent to fellow classmates. And the reason for that is that that information, along with their obituary, can be used as the basis for a memorial article later on. And so it's really important that you send out 3 of them to classmates. Now, why is it important important to send it out to your family because they've got stories that they think are important to be told about you. And it's important that you honor, as you're writing this, that you also honor how the people who loved you felt about you and the stories that they thought were really important. They might remember the many camping trips that you took them on. And that would be important to include because that is their memory of you. That will make your obituary that much more personal to them. So when I had a nephew that passed away, and before he passed away, he asked his son to write his obituary. And so his son knew that I had worked on all the family members' obituaries, so he called me. And so what we did, we filled out the obituary template. We went through these steps. We filled out the obituary template. I had Phil work on it with his son, and they filled out the obituary template. And so all of that information was there. And then we had a big family Zoom. And we asked people to come with stories about Phil. And Phil actually got on the Zoom as we did some of this, and he wasn't able to stay on it very long because he was pretty weak at that time. But as we were on the Zoom, I was taking notes as people were talking about what they remember Phil for, what they, what their biggest memory of Phil was, what was Phil like. And I took all those notes down, and then we wrote the obituary that included all those things, and then we sent it to Phil and his son, and they went through and they took some things out and they added a few things in. But that obituary has how his son felt about him and how the different family members felt about him and what their memories were. And so it was really a fairly complete obituary. And that's why that friends and family interview is so very important. So if you haven't sent that out, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a mind mapping exercise. And so I would ask you to get out a blank sheet of paper. And what you do with this blank sheet of paper is you put your name in the middle of the paper. And then you just start writing things that were important to you. What was important to you? And just jot them down. And later on, you might discard some of these things. Later on, you might add some of these things. But this is going to become a basis for adding some color to our obituary. And so let's just take a few minutes and work on that mind map. Okay, so I'm going to share my mind map with you here. You'll see at the top right of my mind map, I put my Army career, and being a member of that last Women's Army Corps Direct Commission class was important to me. Just as going to West Point was important to you, how I received my commission and being part of that historical last class was very, very important to me. I think was a good mother. I think I was a good mother, but I am a fabulous grandmother, and family is very important to me. I love cooking. Cooking has been my creative outlet for many, many years. Then I love playing the Native American style flute. I started doing that when I retired. It's interesting that I put down that I was a loyal friend, a sister and a wife and a mother. I don't put down that as I put down I was loyal. That's very interesting. I need to think about that a little bit more. I was a history major, so I love history, and I was a lifelong learner. I didn't get my my doctorate degree until 2009, so kind of late in life. The loves to laugh came from a friend. I thought that I gathered friends around me who loved to laugh, and my friends told me, no, that's not the case at all. You love to laugh, and we just laugh with you whenever we are with you. So I love to laugh. So those are the things that I put on my map. They're the things that may or may not end up somehow impacting my obituary. So it's kind of fun to think of a one-liner, that might be what you want us to put into your obituaries, to have a one-liner. In the public affairs, we always tried to have that one line that we would say over and over again so that it would get put in print. We've got a life dedicated to rambunctious performances and dairy products. And I did love the one about prodigious movement of manure. I thought that was very good. Loved hard, played hard. He was a Harley man, riding anything with two wheels and keep the rubber down. And she was the quiet force of her rambunctious family. And she was a force of nature. So it's kind of coming up with a sound bite, maybe a sound bite. There's a book that's been printed called 6-Word Memoirs, not quite what I planned. And it's interesting to see how people condense their lives into just 6 words. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but it's kind of interesting that some people are able to do that. So how do you handle military service? How do you handle your military service? What do you say about your military service in your obituary? I am just going to tell you that there is no one right way to do this. There's no one right way to write an obituary, and there certainly is no one right way to handle your military service. How you handle your military service is going to be based on where that military service was on your mind map. How important was that to you? And so there's different ways of handling it. I'm just going to show you a few here. So these are items that can be included: how you received your commission, when you served, where you served, any conflicts you were in, what branch of the military you were in, what rank you achieved, any decorations you received, what you did do, and what was your greatest achievement in the military. Those are all things that can be included. I'm not saying that any of these have to be included, but these are things that can be included when you're talking about your military service. So here's just bits that I wrote up of somebody who their military service was very important to them. They start out and it doesn't say George died, it says Colonel George died. So he's using his military title throughout his obituary. He attended West Point and received his commission. He continued to serve for 30 years. He was awarded. So I think it's really important, if you're going to say that you were given any ribbons or medals, those were awarded. You didn't earn them, you didn't win them, those were awarded. So be sure to, that's the one thing that I'm a stickler on, is that they were awarded. Then his life of service continued after leaving the active duty military, because somehow, when we're in the military, we do continue to serve when we leave the military. And his ends with a military funeral will be. So this is somebody that the military was foundational in his life. And so that was the way that I would envision that he would write his obituary. Okay, so this is an example that I found online, and these are John Does. These are not real people. They may be real people, but they're using John Doe. John is a veteran of the Vietnam War. For his service, he earned a Purple Heart. He served honorably in the Marines, achieving the rank of Lance Corporal. John's experience in the Marines played a very important role in his life. He frequently pointed out that the Marines taught him the value of discipline, teamwork, and investing in a cause larger than himself. He would often explain to loved ones how these values contributed to his success as a human rights lawyer upon returning home from Vietnam. So this is how another gentleman handled his military service. This is another example, and I think this is a, they use the name Jack. This is like a John Doe, a Jack Doe. They use the name Jack, but I would imagine this is actually a real person, came from a real obituary. Jack's greatest devotion was to the military. He attended West Point Military Academy and graduated with honors in 1989. As a commissioned second lieutenant in the United States Army, Jack served in Operation Desert Storm. He spent several more years as an active member of the Army before earning his PhD. Jack then became a professor at West Point, primarily teaching military history courses. So this is another way that somebody else handled their military service. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. So this is another way I listed over on the left. John Doe attended West Point Military Academy. He received a commission as a second lieutenant after leaving the military, and that might be the way that you want to handle it. So the way that I handled it in mine is Mary Lou received a direct commission into the Women's Army Corps and went on to retire from the Army as Major. And that is how I handled my military service. But how you handle your military service is really up to you and up to it, and it's kind of based on the importance that it had in your life and continues to have in your life, and then that's how you're going to deal with it. It's going to be based on that. As I said, there's just no one way to do it, and there's no right way and there's no wrong way. So what you're going to be doing this week is you're going to be adding some color to your obituary template. So my obituary template is in white. That is the things that, and you don't need to use all of your obituary template. Only the things that are important to you are you going to use out of the obituary template. So I'm not going to go over what was in my obituary template, but I put down, after teaching 2 years, she received a direct commission into the Women's Army Corps and went on to retire from the U.S. Army as a major. They met when they were both second lieutenants at Fort McClellan, Alabama. Everybody loves that story. How did you meet? So there it is. Together they had 3 children, and I named them. She went on to work in education, first as a teacher in a one-room alternative school, helping dropouts obtain their high school diploma or GED, and later for the state of Iowa in teacher licensure, retiring in 2016. She was involved with the Iowa State University Osher Lifelong Learning Institute and the Iowa State University Women's Club. She received her doctorate in educational leadership in 2009 from Drake University, writing her dissertation, The Last Wax, about the women who attended the last commissioning class of the Women's Army Corps with her. She enjoyed time with family, cooking, biking, and playing the Native American style flute. So those are things that I took out of my mind map. A lot of the color here came from my mind map, and you could actually, I don't know whether I did it in this one or it's the next one, but you could actually even condense this more. There doesn't have to be this much. You could condense it more. But this is what I put together for my newspaper obituary. So this is my newspaper obituary. So here I've taken more words out. It still has the essence of what I wanted in there, but I've removed a lot of words, and sometimes it's good to do that, to condense things, to go back through it and condense things. And so I took a lot of words out. It makes it a little less expensive to print in your newspaper. But it still says the same thing. She enjoyed time with family, cooking, biking, and playing the Native American style flute. So your assignment is to write your newspaper obituary, and it's going to be an appenitive because it's going to have color in it. It's going to tell us about you. We're going to be able to read your newspaper obituary and get an idea of your character and who you were. That's what we want. So so you need, if you haven't done it yet, send out your family and friends survey. One of the things that we're going to do next week is talk about some of the things that came out of your friends and family surveys that might have surprised you in a good way or maybe in a bad way. You don't need to tell us in a bad way, but in a good way. And I want you to begin looking at online obituaries. I love to include online obituaries in my class that students find. And so if you find one, email it to me, let me know where it's at, give me the screenshot or the URL for it so that I can find it. And tell me what it is that you liked about it. What was there in that obituary that you really liked? And I probably will only use 4 or 5. And so if you don't find one, that's fine. It's not something that you have to do. But if you find an interesting one, please share it with me. So are there any questions about what we're going to be doing for next week? You're going to be writing your newspaper obituary. You're going to expand that template by adding color in. And you are going to have a newspaper obituary. And then we will take our newspaper obituary and we're going to expand it even further, and then we will have our online obituary. But for next week, you're going to do your newspaper obituary. Be sure to send out your friends and family if you haven't done that already. And if you find an obituary, an online obituary that you like, because that's the direction we're going to begin moving next week, then go ahead and share that with me and let me know so that I can include it in my PowerPoint. Any questions or comments from anybody? Yes, Steve.
Mary Lou, thanks for this. Will we be able to access your PowerPoint that you just?
Yes. What I'm going to do is I will take my PowerPoints and I will make a PDF of them, and I will send you the PDF so that you have I have email addresses for everybody that's here, and so that I will share that PDF with you. I will also be taking the video, and I will put that in a YouTube, and I will share the YouTube address with you for that. Any other questions or comments?
You have 2 questions in chat.
I do, thank you, because I do not pay attention to that. I should have said, somebody needs to watch chat for me. Thank you.
I nominate Jean.
How many words should we target for our opinative dictionary obituary? So a lot of it depends on where you live. And we'll go into that a little bit more next week, but it depends on where you live. In New York, it basically costs $50. It costs $10 per word, basically, in New York for your opinative, for your newspaper obituaries. Out here, it's not as expensive. I can get my obituary, I think, printed for around $250 to $350. But in some places it's very, very expensive. That's why a lot of people go to the small ads that then direct you to the online obituary. So the number of words that you're going to use is going to be based on, how much money do you want to spend on your newspaper obituary. I will tell you that, even you can put more in your online obituary, but even your online obituary, somebody should be able to sit down and read that in about 2 to 3 minutes. If it takes longer than that to read, it's too long.
Mary Lou, this is Jim Fitch. I'm the one that asked the question about the number of words. Specifically, I was looking for what range should the length of the assignment you've given us for next week be?
That depends on what you want to include. Some people can probably do it in a paragraph.
Oh, okay.
For some people, it might be a paragraph. For me, you could see it was, and of course, I write in the newspaper style where I have lots of white space in mine. You notice that none of my paragraphs were very long because as a public affairs officer, I was taught, to how to write in that newspaper style. So none of my paragraphs were very long.
Thank you.
For everyone who might be thinking about Taft's memorial, the minimum is 850 words and the maximum is 925.
Could you say that one more time, Greg?
Yeah, the minimum was 850 words, and the maximum was 925. So we
Okay.
went through writing Taft's memorial for one of our classmates from B1 over the past year.
I'm trying to think. I'm not quite sure how many words are in my newspaper. I did count the words, but I think I go over that next week. So I did count the words. I think it has about 225 words in it. It's not all that long.
Fortunately for Taft, we didn't have to pay by the word.
Yeah.
Mary Lou,
Yes.
I have a question. I want to make sure I understand this. I'm a little confused. So when we talk about the types, there is an informative versus an opinionative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an opinionative is going to begin to have some color in it.
Right. So which do you
Informative
want-
only has the facts. It's just the facts.
So which are you looking for our assignment?
I'm looking for an opinionative. I want to begin to see who you are.
Okay, but that is different from the online, correct?
Yes, we're going to begin to add stories, actual short snippets of stories to have your online obituary. It will go into it in a little more detail.
Mary Lou,
Yes, Des.
suggestions on where to find online obituaries other than those we've read on our own where we've known somebody.
A funeral home has online obituaries. You can look there. The newspaper has online obituaries. Legacy has online obituaries. But again, if that's not an easy thing for you to do right now, Des, don't worry about that. As I said, I'm only going to be able to use probably five or so. But it's good to begin to look at online obituaries and see the difference in the variation.
Thanks.
Mary Lou, you have a question about, do you have to list multiple marriages? You'll see it done both ways.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. Yeah, no, you do not need to list multiple marriages, especially if there were no children coming out of that marriage. You do not need to list multiple marriages. If there were children coming out of that marriage, you may want to do that, as there are no hard and fast rules about obituaries. There used to be one hard and fast rule, and that was that the obituary had to list the cause of death. And then we began paying for obituaries, and when people began paying for their obituaries, it was no longer required that the cause of death be listed in obituaries. So as you go through some of my slides, you'll see that there are several people that were married that had previous marriages, and they handled them in different ways. And again, you can look online and see if you see something that you like in the way somebody handled it. You might Google it, how should I handle more than one marriage in my obituary? And it might pop up and might give you different ideas for how to handle it. But there is no hard and fast rule as to how to do that, or if you have to. I think, does that cover everything? Well, I would like to thank everyone for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Hey, Mary Lou,
Yes.
got one alibi here. All right, we're gonna meet next week on Thursday, same time,
Same time.
but you've got another group, you've got other people that are gonna be joining. Is that not true? 'Cause
I
not-
may have some people who missed this class that may join next class, but they'll have the video to look at, and they'll be able to go through the PowerPoints.
So throughout the month, it's gonna be a continuous flow and people come in the third week or the fourth week, they're just gonna catch up.
There will be very few that do that, but there will be a few that miss one or miss two. We'll see.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday in the squares.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mary Lou.
Mary Lou.
Bye.
Great to see
You're
everybody.
Everybody.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Mary Lou.
Bye-bye.
Bye.